fine. All right. All right. So today, welcome to our second Cultural Coins financial webinar. My name is Eugene, and we have been sponsored by One Digital. Today, we're going to talk about investing with purpose, how social impact can transform your financial futures. So I'm going to let in our speakers. We have Dien, we have Kevin, Toussaint, and Ayo. So happy that y'all are here. Could y'all just introduce yourself? Tell us about a little bit about you, what you do, and if you could travel anywhere right now, where would you go and why? Who would like to start first?
Not me, because I don't want to have a lame place to travel and then everyone say something cool. So I'm going to chill.
Okay. Dien, how about yourself?
Sure. Dien Yuen, it's the CEO of Daylight. We do professional development. We train advisors around philanthropy and social impact. Where do I want to be? My Crystal Thompkins is supposed to be here with you. I am the replacement. Crystal is actually in Vietnam. So if there's a place I want to be hanging out with her. Wow. She took 3 weeks off, is traveling between Vietnam, Malaysia, and Singapore. So I would love to be hanging out with her.
All right. How about yourself, Kevin? Oh, go ahead, Toussaint.
Toussaint Bailey, managing partner of Uplifting Capital. So we do private investments, all for impact, and build portfolios using investments that are impactful in the real estate space, infrastructure space, private equity, and venture capital space. I would travel to, and I never thought I would be saying this until this year, but as my number one, my oldest daughter is obsessed with Japan. And I had a lot of places on the list, but that's risen to the top because of her obsession and interest. And so right now that's become number one.
Nice. I'll go. My name is Kevin Cheeks. I'm founder of Impact FI. We're a registered investment advisory firm based in the Bay Area, focusing primarily on equity compensation and sustainable investing. So working with a lot of clients in tech, but also layering that with the impact and the sustainable ideology there. In terms of where I'd want to be, I mean, San Francisco is a great place to be, but if I had to pick a second place, it would be anywhere in Mexico. Mexico's, I think, my happy place. I've been to, I think, 26 or 27 different countries, including Japan, but there's no place like Mexico.
All right, I think my decision is still good. Hi, how's everybody doing today? My name is Ayo Idowu. Everybody can hear me well, correct?
Yep.
Ayo Idowu. I'm a wealth advisor at Integrated Wealth Management here in the Twin Cities, but we have offices across the country. For the most part, clientele is in I pride myself on working with a lot of Black and brown folks as well. Mainly people, equity compensation, kind of like Kevin, business owners, and then sports and entertainment, more on the sports side. Was an ex-football player myself, which is how I naturally got into that niche. And if there's one place I could go, I'm Nigerian, and I go to Nigeria all the time, and it's the only place I've been in Africa. And I have Africa, but I've been more places than me. So the next place on my list is Nairobi, Kenya. I want to go so bad.
All right. That's awesome. One place I'd like to go is just the beach. It's real simple right now. That's where we're at. I'm not even dreaming that big yet. So one question we'd love to ask y'all is like, why did you start social impact investing? And also, what does social impact investing look like to you?
I'll take that one first. So I always start by talking about how I started in the business. I started in the business, obviously being a finance student, went to play professional football. When I got done playing, the gentleman who was managing my money gave me an opportunity to be a junior, and that's kind of how I propelled, started my own business and went on there. But it actually goes back to college when I was an accounting student. I just remember being an accounting student and working a lot of hours. When we talk about people of color, normally we equate money and income to how many hours you work. So I remember there was a gentleman in the dorms next to me who I just remember I thought he was selling drugs with all the stuff he had and all the little hours he was working. And I figured out he was a day trader who'd been saving his money since he was a kid and basically making more money than me. I had like 20 hours of work a week. I was working at the local bar. I was working in the library. I was working in the weight room as a college athlete, right? So I was just always working, making $7.25 an hour, which is a lot of money when I was in school. But I just remember he was doing really well in his underwear before 10 a.m. than I was doing with all of those hours. So I wanted to learn all about investing. I went to switch my major from accounting to finance with focus on investments, because my thing is, come from a family that worked really hard, multiple jobs, and I wanted to kind of spread the gospel of how to make money in your sleep to people that looked like me and came from neighborhoods I came from. So to take that another step, socially responsible investing is something that I have been more into over the past couple of years. When I first started, it was a niche for sure, but it wasn't. It was always looked at as you are giving up returns for investing. And now I feel like in the last 3 to 5 years, it is not necessarily the case anymore. Actually, in a lot of portfolios are outperforming. So socially responsible investing, to me, I just say anything that you have that is near and dear to your heart, you can align your values and make money at the same time. That's probably the best way I can define socially responsible investing.
Oh man, so all of that resonates. So I feel the need to jump in next. I will also kind of talk about how I got into the industry. For me, it's been kind of seeing problems or seeing gaps and solving problems. So it's been a good chunk of my professional career, 10 plus years as a lawyer. And then as a young partner, was pretty bothered by how equity compensation worked in law firms, kind of this lockstep compensation. And so I had a friend who was leaving one of the big wirehouses to start his own firm. And had a couple of people interested in joining him. And so I started with designing what I thought an equitable sharing of ownership would look like for advisors who were bringing most of the talent to the firm and often taking very little of the benefits of that work. And so built that, ultimately loved building in that space, became CEO of that firm and grew that, mostly focused on advisor experience and client experience. And so, social, and that was traditional wealth management, high net worth clients, business owners, professionals. In 2020, really, there was something aligned, a gap that I had internally with kind of helping wealthy people stay wealthy or get wealthier, with a gap I saw in the marketplace. And so there was all this work that we were doing as a firm around private market investments or alternative investments, and starting to understand that space and starting to think about what portfolio construction looked like in that space. We were doing similar work along the sustainable investment front. So thinking about how to align clients' values with their public markets portfolios and filtering stocks by different value choices and all these things. But there was no intersection of those two things. And I was aware of all these different firms doing all this innovative stuff, whether that's in venture capital or affordable housing or energy transition and infrastructure stuff, or even private equity, closing markets for underserved communities, or closing gaps for underserved communities. And so started to build what a wealth management solution would look like, comprised of all private market impact investments, and launch what we're doing now to sort of close that gap, and have fortunately found an interest there.
I think Toussaint, what you actually just said mirrors a lot. I think of my own journey. I was working at Wells Fargo in private banking, and I remember there was a manager who told a group of us, we don't help people get rich, we help rich people get richer. And I was like, well, that kind of sucks. It never really sat well with me, but throughout my career, I started to see that more and more and more, that the more people had, the more we were doing for them, the more we could get them, the better the discounts, the bigger the team, all these things. And so I think 2020, and I've heard this from a lot of my peers, seemed like it was a big tipping point. But I think there was plenty leading up to 2020 where, just finally I said, I'm not doing this for the right reasons. I'm not doing this for the right people. What can I do? Can I use my skill set like Liam Neeson in Taken, right? Like a very particular set of skills. How can I use this to do something more meaningful and make an impact, pun intended?
My journey is a little bit different. I went to law school, was going to try and save the world as a public defender. Did not happen. I ended up in nonprofit work, doing plan giving work, especially between using a law degree and my passion for nonprofits. Plan giving seemed to be a really interesting spot. And I moved to the Bay Area during the .com days. And it was very eye-opening for me because there's a lot of entrepreneurs, right, building amazing businesses during the .com days, and a lot of the Asian Americans and also Asians. So you're Taiwanese, you're Chinese, you're South Asians, and they were taking their companies public, and their financial estate plans were in place, but they were missing the philanthropic plans. And so I was brought in with a lot of advisors brought me in to help a lot of these entrepreneurs think about, how do they want to give? Is it here in the US? Is it back home? Is it both? What does that look like? And so that started my journey as a philanthropy advisor. And it's been an amazing space, but being in that space also means understanding a little bit about your estate and your financial planning pieces. But these are entrepreneurs, right? They build products because they want to change the world. And so even with their finances and the way they approach it, it's not just about, I just want to make big money. It's also about, well, what am I going to do with the wealth that I'm going to have? Because this wealth is way beyond what I've ever thought I would get. And so we started, this was back in 2000, talking about, what can you build in your business to do good, but then what can you use your wealth for? Right. And so that kind of started my whole journey into the space. And impact investing and social responsible investing seemed to be so natural, right, to pull it all together in our line of work. And then I started teaching. And I was teaching at the American College of Financial Services, and now I teach at Daylight. But we wanted to try and get this concept out to a lot more advisors, especially in the Black and Brown community, because a lot of people don't know how to leverage, right, all the resources that are out there. Even I would say when we talk about impact investing, from the grant donor advised fund side all the way to making money and small business entrepreneurs, portfolio side of things and everything in between. We need to do more education in this space to get more people involved.
For sure.
100%. I feel like we end up doing as much education, and we should. I would love to talk about how Daylight can help with this. We educate people as much about that kind of portfolio for change making as I think we do about impact investments specifically, and we talk about it in terms of pulling the right levers for the right sort of change. Right. So you have philanthropy and concessionary investing, everything along the spectrum, going to ESG and risk mitigating things that have to do with environment or social change, and then you have impact investing that targets very intentional things and targets market rate returns. And I think there's enough proliferation of options now that you can be really nuanced in your thinking, but people just up to this point aren't aware of all the tools that are available and the differences between them.
Toussaint, would you mind elaborating on that? Because I see that a lot too. I think socially responsible investing, ESG investing, impact investing oftentimes get blurred. And I find myself having a lot of conversation around that as well. So, or if anybody else wants to elaborate more on those concepts.
Yeah, I'm happy to. If you think of a spectrum of change and sort of impact, and then a spectrum of kind of completely financial goals, because what we're talking about with impact investing is marrying financial goals and impactful goals. And so if you think of that spectrum, starting with impact only, you have pure philanthropy with no expectation of return. On the opposite end of that spectrum, you have traditional investing. So pure returns with no consideration of impact. If you were to move in from philanthropy, you have things like SRI, or socially responsible investing, where you're screening for certain attributes that have a negative effect on the world, and you're not necessarily screening for financial reasons. If you move one step closer to traditional investing, you have things like ESG, where you're screening for both impactful reasons and because things have a certain effect on the world, but you're also expecting a mitigation of risk. So think about environmental factors, or social factors, or labor practices. All of those things you would think, if they're not done right, they would have an adverse effect on the long-term sustainability of whatever profits are being made today. And then continuing to move toward sort of market rate investing from there, you have impact investing, and at this point, there's a split between what you think of as concessionary impact investing, where you're expecting to give up some return, but a lot of impact, and I would say most impact investments expect the return to be commensurate with market rate return, but there's an intentional targeting of specific outcomes, and those outcomes are measured and material. And that often happens in the private markets, not always, but it's tough to get a public market company to both hold its fiduciary duty to investors, to shareholders, and also target a specific positive outcome on people, planet, our economy. So that often happens in the private markets. And then one step out from that, you have then traditional investment, which is completely focused on returns with no consideration of impact.
Can I piggyback off? I feel like, Toussaint, since you have the floor, can I piggyback off Kevin's question? I want to ask you, how does somebody on the retail side, how are they able to, well, as a client, let's say, how are they able to achieve those at all levels? And when I say all levels, like, let's say you have a Schwab, Vanguard, or your own kind of private retail trading account. Let's say somebody that works with an advisor, and then let's say a high net worth client that works with an advisor. Does that look different for all of those places for you guys? Or is that, do you have access to all, do all three have the same amount of access?
It does. Right now, it looks different. We're working on changing that on the retail side for these private market investments, because a lot of those are accredited investor level, and many of them, even the ones that we invest in, are qualified purchaser level. So that accredited investor is $1 million of assets and up, or $200,000 of income, which is obviously out of reach for a large number of people. And then that qualified purchaser level is $5 billion of investable assets, excluding primary residence. And so obviously a lot of those private market impact investments are out of reach, but there's a lot that can be done with a public markets portfolio. So I think there's been a lot more sophistication around ESG funds that are labeling themselves impact. I think the rush toward ESG in 2020 came with the advent of a lot of index funds, like lightly screening things and slapping a green label on those, or slapping a social label on those, and then trying to hook those to retail investors. I think people have wised up, and so there's better solutions. I think a really good social impact investment. I don't know if you guys know Rachel Robichaudi at Adesina. She is a great example of that in an ETF wrapper. There's also a lot of surprisingly accessible SMAs, so separately managed accounts, where you can do something even more bespoke, which is start screening by specific impact themes. Examples of that would be like an ethic or a Perio or others that allow you to do specific tailoring of public market investments. And even on the fixed income side, available to retail investors, there's becoming more and more consciousness around putting impact and putting some of these kind of environmental and social considerations in investments. And so there's a whole portfolio of things on the public side. There's a much more restricted portfolio of things on the private side, but we are vigorously working with lawyers about how to get around some of these restrictions that frankly have gotten somewhat silly, because somebody's dollar level doesn't necessarily indicate the level of sophistication. And so, yeah.
I think to add to that too, just echoing the idea of technology starting to reduce some of the barriers and reduce some of this friction. We're starting to see, I think, greater movement towards, I guess, transparency around how fund companies are voting. So when you own individual stocks, everybody gets those thick proxy, or probably emails by now, but you get these proxy votes, which you're allowed to cast a vote and decide on some of the initiatives that these companies are trying to implement. So a lot of times that's being done by institutional investors, the big money managers like Vanguard and BlackRock and those. So when you own individual stock, you can cast those votes yourself, and there's tools out there now to help you align your voting with your values. And we're starting to see even some of the fund companies like BlackRock is starting to pass through some of that proxy voting to people. So I think even if you are getting into some of the, the traditional funds and some of the traditional investments, there's potentially going to be some opportunity to shape or have your voice expressed in alignment with your values.
Yeah, and just to
Dien,
go
what are
back,
some of the ways that I was going to ask you?
For the smaller retail donors or consumers, there's also these mutual funds, right? There's ETFs and mutual funds. Like iShares has the NWACP fund. So you could put, I think their minimum is like $10,000. And then for me, what's really interesting is looking for, on the private side, opportunities to invest in funds like to purchase businesses, right? If you're a BIPOC entrepreneur, instead of you having to build a business, what if there's ways that you could access funds, to actually go purchase a business and become an instant entrepreneur, or even just support small businesses or affordable housing. I think there's lots of impact investing opportunities out there like that. And it's not so formal, and it doesn't mean that you need $1 million or $2 million to put into these funds. I think there's smaller amounts and sums. But I think across this whole spectrum, it doesn't matter what type of client you are, from the retail all the way to the ultra high net worth, there is something for you. And it's just a matter of looking for it. And also just wanting to do good, especially being very targeted about the communities that you want to support.
That brings up a good point. There's CDFIs, community development financial institutions. These are depository institutions that do reinvest into the community, that do reinvest into Black and brown business owners. There's a lot of regional or community banks. There's Black-owned banks out there. So it doesn't have to just be market-based investments. There's a lot of different things where we could put our money and our energies into to support some of these causes.
Yeah. And something that's super, because I struggle with this all the time, is how do we help our communities know that these opportunities are out there? Because my philosophy has always been, if you don't know how to play the game, you can't leverage, right? You cannot build generational wealth this way. So what do you do?
I'll take that for a second. I actually resonate with Kevin, A, because I started Wells Fargo too. And B, I think we all had that moment at Wells Fargo where they basically told you that we make rich people money, not everybody money. And it kind of just like, it blew your mind a little bit. And one thing I feel like as a Black wealth advisor, as a person that works in finance that is of color, I feel like I always talk about this, I feel like our mission is a little different than everybody else that sits around us in our offices, right? Not only are we supposed to generate revenue, but we also have to find a way to generate revenue and be able to answer questions for the people who finally gather up the courage in our communities to ask us questions, right? So I feel like leading workshops, speaking to organizations, partnering with foundations, like that is a big part of what I do. I do not generate revenue off it. It's obviously in my quote unquote free time, but again, because we have this knowledge in our groups, or we have this knowledge, but we're part of our communities, it's kind of our goal, and it's our mission to be able to do that. The worst thing in the world, I feel like, is when someone finally rustles up some courage to talk to you and you tell them that they don't make enough money to speak to you, right? It takes nothing to have a conversation, put somebody on the straight and narrow path. And that's why, to answer your question, what I've been doing is big workshops, financial literacy education. I'm here in the Twin Cities, so obviously George Floyd impact was a little different because it was right down the street from my house. And starting initiatives, partnering with groups in the cities that are looking for financial education. There's the Minnesota Private College Fund. I'm like an adjunct professor as a part of the Private College Fund. These kids get internships and they get about 20 grand a year in scholarships. And one thing I'm doing is they have to attend 4 of my financial literacy sessions to get their full scholarship, because what they notice is originally these kids were getting 20 grand and they'd all show up in BMWs and cars that they probably shouldn't be driving and not spending it correctly, right? So I feel like that's the biggest way when we talk about making an impact, it's the financial literacy education side.
So I think to add to
Dien,
that,
what some of the ways I was going to ask, what's some of the ways that people can be thoughtful about philanthropy without having necessarily a ton of big dollars to put toward that.
We talk a lot about also just the planned gift, the bequest giving as well. And when we talk about impact, it doesn't have to be now, right? Because right now, like, there's a couple of families we've worked with that says, I just made my money. I want to enjoy my money. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? They should be able to enjoy their money. But I think the idea is then, how do we enjoy this money, but then also ensure the legacy that it continues along with it, right? That it stays in the family, it stays in the community, and the impact that it can have. And so a lot of times we think about money as one dimensional. Right? This is all we can do versus, okay, this dollar, how do we leverage it in 20 different ways? Right. And that's part, I think, of our work in the philanthropic sector is, just because you have an asset, right? Highly appreciated asset. Instead of figuring out how to pass this on to your next generation, you have to pay taxes on it. Like, could we use that and put that inside a charitable manager trust where we can continue to receive income, but support the church or the organizations that we love, right? But that's the problem, is like understanding how tools work, how to leverage it. Sometimes it's even beyond a lot of our families because we don't do estate planning, right, as well. So when we talk about even just impact investing, we have to talk about estate and financial planning and philanthropy to really think about this holistic approach, right, to legacy wealth. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that's a long-winded way of saying, philanthropy is just one way to affect our intentions, right? But it doesn't have to be a charitable gift. There are many different ways. And sometimes building a business and hiring people, that might be the best way to do it. We just have to be a little bit more creative on how we approach this.
I was going to say, donating your time and your expertise, if you're at that point in your career or in your wealth journey where you have the means to donate your time and share that knowledge, that can also be quite impactful as well.
Can I just throw out the 6 T's for you so you know this? Everybody knows the 3 T's, right? Time, talent, treasure. Okay, the other 3 T's, ties, testimony, and truth. Ties and testimony in our communities are gold, right? Sometimes the ties and testimony is even worth more than the treasure itself. And so when we talk about, how we work in our community, I think we have to talk about the 6 T's. And the truth, that is like the epiphany, right? Of how do we have this whole alignment and that we are living the truth that we believe in. So.
I love the charitable giving conversation because it's something I've been leaning more into over the past 2-3 years. And it's funny because there are people who are inclined to giving naturally. There's some people who never thought they would give, right? Especially, at one point, my business was about 60% people of color. And I was very proud of that. But it's funny because when we find self-made people of color, giving is generally the last thing we're thinking of at times, right? Because we feel like we've made it up this ladder. And on top of that, we probably have family members that we're not thinking of large institutional giving back to our schools, giving back to our churches, communities, XYZ. But I've noticed having the planned giving conversation not only motivates people to give, but when we obviously talk about the tax benefits of it and whatnot, we've had individuals that would never gave, but then understanding separating a certain amount of money, let's say, into a donor advised fund, and now they feel like they have this wallet of some sort that they can donate to organizations. And when they go to these the galas and fundraisers at the end of the year, they have a sense of pride of putting money into this wallet, getting a tax write-off, but then still watching that money grow, and it becomes like their gifting budget for the year, right? So I love the fact that people do that, and I love the fact that you focus in on that, because if it's in my savings account, I'm a lot less likely to make an impact with that money, besides like my tithing at church, versus if it's in an account that I already have designated for gifting, giving, and impact.
Yeah, I love that.
We've seen the greediest people turn into givers in our practice.
Yeah, I think people often can conceive of giving as a net negative. One of the things we talk about is that uplifting others can and should feel uplifting. And until people, even for me, building a company that was around something social beyond something financial, I felt somewhat obligated to do. Like it was something I felt compelled to do when I set out to do it. I had no idea how internally fulfilling that would be on the other side. And I think when people start down that giving road, it seems to me, at least from my own experience, that people realize it's actually not something that's depleting. It's something that actually adds to the richness of their lives, but you don't know until you start that habit.
Yeah. And just to let you know, full disclosure, Daylight, we are actually a social enterprise. We didn't go in as individuals for cash investments. We actually asked for impact investments to build our firm because we wanted to live the values, right? And then when I tell a story to other of my Black American colleagues, they're like, wow, how did you do that, right? How did you think about this? And I was like, white people do this all the time. you guys just don't know about it. So we just need to help you understand how this works, right? So
what's very refreshing about this conversation, I would say, one of the most refreshing parts is I feel like when we talk about social impact investing or socially responsible investing or ESG, we always touch on the investment securities, ETFs, mutual fund side. I love that this conversation has gone full circle on impact and not just investing, right? Because I think that's important. And I feel like I was even partially blindsided as some of the listeners are too, because it's like that is part of it. And Toussaint, I'm glad you kind of listed that down as just not the investing side, but just the impact you're doing socially with your dollars or your time.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to take this back too. I'm going to bring this into some of our conversations with clients as well.
Oh, this is great. Yeah. So we're actually going to wrap up. I mean, I feel like this conversation has been great. I cannot believe how many gems that we got from this. Like, I not only have we learned, but I feel like everyone here has learned a little bit about someone else's firm and what they're doing. And then at the big picture is like, there are BIPOC folks that are thinking about giving back and impacting in a very different way. It seems like 2020 was the aha moment for a lot of us to really create that catalyst. I mean, that is why CHIP is even a company. That's why I even really got involved in personal finance. So it's good to see that like everybody is kind of on board in terms of making sure that we're leaving a legacy, but with a positive impact. First of all, thank you so much for all of y'all just coming in and talking about investing with a purpose. We were sponsored by One Digital. We're so grateful for that. We will be having another financial cultural coins conversation, and that will be October 23rd. And that's really about getting your finances in order. And it's called Finance and Chill, Stress-Free Strategies for Planning for Your Future. We're so happy that y'all are here. But yeah, we're going to make sure that once folks really start getting their financial planning in order, then they start value-based investing. Thanks y'all so much for being here. And we'll see y'all shortly. We'll see y'all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was
Thank
good.
you guys.